I've talked about code interpreter being like our intern that's working for us, but an intern that knows how to code and write computer software. But at the same time, the code interpreter is our intern that can read documents, that can reason, that can write outlines, that can draft emails for us. And one of the things that's really helpful is that we want to guide the intern in the right approach to each task. Because as a programmer, sometimes the intern is going to want to write software to accomplish a task that we don't really want it to write software for. And I want to kind of give you some intuition behind this because this is going to be really, really important, particularly when we start working with larger documents or we're trying to put together larger outputs. There are going to be cases where we're going to have to struggle to make sure the intern does the right thing with the right tool. So certain things we're going to want it to program to solve those problems. Certain things we're going to want it to do itself by reading. Now, when I say itself, I mean we want ChatGPT or GPT-4 to do the work of reading, analyzing, writing, drafting, these types of things. Now, I want to help you get a sense of how you can tell what is being done. And also, I know this is a bit abstract, so I kind of want to give you sort of a visual for this in a conversation. So this is an example before where I said I wanted to reorganize some files for me. And it's going to do this two ways. The text up here, this is something that GPT-4 or ChatGPT, this is something that it's producing. Now, when GPT-4 is asked to write text, it's extremely good at it. When GPT-4 is asked to read text, it's very good at reading it. It's very good at outlining. But certain things it can't do. It can't operate on files. It can't rename a file. That's not what it does. It reads and writes text is the way you can think about it. So when you tell it to rename a file, it can't do it directly. It has to write some Python code to help it. So when this little gray box shows up, that means that Code Interpreter has decided that the task that you've asked it to do is going to require some software to be written to help it along. And so what it's going to do is it's going to write the software, because if you look at the software is just text, and it's really good at writing text. But the software, that text that it writes, that program that it writes, can then be run in order to do things that GPT-4 cannot do, like rename a file or read a file, or in this case, it's extracting a zip file, extracting all the files from a zip file. So you can think of it as Python allows the GPT-4 to use what it knows how to do, which is to write text. To write text that's a set of instructions or a way of using a bunch of tools on the computer. So it's programming some software to help itself. Now in this case, whenever this little gray box pops up, you need to be cued in that Code Interpreter has written some software and is running it and is trying to solve part of the problem by writing some software. So in this case, what it's done, it says the extracted files from the zip are as follows. And the first thing it does is it tells us what it's doing. It says, all right, let's begin by extracting the contents of the zip file to see what we have. And then this gray box pops up. And so what this is an indication of is that it's decided that the task of extracting the contents of the zip file, that it can't do it itself, so it's going to have to write a little bit of software to do that. This gray box popping up is it writing the software and executing it. And then what we see after the gray box is the result of its software running. It's getting the output of that, and then it's explaining to us what the output of its software was. So this is a little bit complex to follow, so I want to, and it's honestly just quite mind-bending that this is possible now, but I want to walk through this again really carefully because it's important to understand what's happening, because you'll need it later for more advanced things. And if you don't fully grasp it now, don't worry too much, because as you begin using Code Interpreter, it'll give you a better sense of what this is. This first part is GPT-4. It took in your message up here and it said, okay, I need to do something with this zip file. I need to unzip it. And that's what it decides. I need to extract the contents of this zip file. Then it says, that's not something I'm capable of as an AI. I need to write a software, a program, a little tool for myself to accomplish that task, because I can't directly do that. So this gray box is it writing the software and executing the software to perform that task of extracting the zip file. And then what it's going to do is it's going to take the result of that, which you can actually see over here, which is labeled result. So if you expand that little gray box, the top part will be the software. The second thing will be the result of it. So this is it ran its program that it decided to create, and the result is what it got back, which is a list of all the files that were inside the zip file that were extracted. And then this, what that comes right after that is it's going to be explaining to you what happened, what the result was. So it's going to tell you what it's going to do. It's going to show the gray box saying, I've written some software and I'm running it. If you expand that gray box, you can look at the details of the software and you can look at the details of what the result of running that software was. And then right after the gray box, it's going to tell you, here is what happened. Here's the output or the result of that. Now, that's a really important thing to understand. It's going to all the time be trying to figure out, does it do it itself? Does GPT-4 itself need to do this task? Or do I need to write some software to do it? Now, here's an example of a conversation. You notice there's no gray boxes here. This is 100% GPT-4. It's doing all the work. It also means that it's something that you could have done with just ChatGPT without having to use code interpreter at all. You could have just gone and selected the GPT-4 model. So if you're not getting gray boxes, you're actually not using features of code interpreter that you need for that conversation. But that's a separate point. But this is what it looks like when it's doing everything itself. It's just reading the text, which is the prompt that you've got. It's responding to it and producing some output. Over here, in contrast, it's reading what you put in. It's deciding that it needs to go and do some task, in this case, extracting the contents of the zip file. It's writing some software, which is the gray box, and then it's telling you what the result was by reading the result and explaining it to you or writing a result. Now, I talked about document as an object or document as knowledge, and this is where it gets really, really important. If we're operating on files, if we're going to resize an image, if we're going to rename a file, if we're going to delete something, if we're going to create a movie, write a PowerPoint file and update it, those are things that are best done in Python. So if we tell it to create a PowerPoint presentation, we're going to expect it to pop up a little gray box at some point because GPT-4 can't just directly create a PowerPoint file. If we tell it to graph something, we expect to see that gray box pop up because it needs to write Python in order to generate that graph and that visualization. If we ask it to do some numerical computation on a large amount of data in particular, we really expect to see that box pop up. So if you give it some large Excel file and you say sum this column, you want to see that gray box pop up that tells you it's written some Python software to go and read that data, to do the computation, inside of Python and inside of that software, and then it's going to give you the output and tell you about it. Those types of things you really want. If you're dealing with numerical data analysis, images, resizing, those types of things, even detecting people in images, those are the types of things you're going to want in Python. If you're dealing with understanding text or writing text, or outlining, or summarizing, or translating text. Anytime you're dealing with text, you really want to do everything in your power to get GPT-4 to do that work in itself and not to write Python code for it. So, I've worked with GPT-4 and code interpreter to try to get it to explain this. It's kind of funny because in this conversation, it doesn't know GPT-4 exists yet, which is kind of humorous. Although GPT-4 clearly exists inside of this conversation. So, if you're doing natural language processing, meaning you're dealing with text, and you want to have it tell you what's in that text, summarize it. So if you upload a Word document and you're going to say summarize what's in this document, that's something you want GPT-4 doing. If you go and you say, I'm going to give you a document and I want you to answer trivia questions based on the document. So you're going to give it a Word document and you want it to answer questions about the document. Or in the case of the Vanderbilt travel policy, if you want it to answer questions about the Vanderbilt travel policy, what is and what is not allowed, that's something that you want GPT-4 to do. On the other hand, if you upload an Excel file and you say generate a visualization, that's something you want Python to do. If you upload an Excel file and you tell it to calculate a correlation between two things, that's something you want it to write some Python to assist in. So you want to see that gray box pop up. If you go and do machine learning on images, you're typically going to want to see that gray box pop up. Or if you're going to do image manipulation, grayscaling, resizing, copying. If you're doing comprehension, you want to read, understand, and explain. That's something you want with GPT-4. If you want it to go and write code, it's saying web development. It should be done in Python. Well, this is a little bit tricky one, and I'm going to give you an example of this. If you're having it write code, you want GPT-4 writing the code, but you want the code it writes to use frameworks and things. So this is a little bit of a mixed one. So I would say if you're generating code, it's a little bit different, but in general, you want GPT-4 writing the code because you're writing text. So I think it gets that one wrong a little bit. Simulating conversations, definitely GPT-4. You want it to pretend to be two people talking. Mathematical computations, Python. Translating languages, GPT-4. It's getting a lot of these right, not all of them. Image processing, Python. System scripting, Python, like moving files around, creating directories, things like that. Video processing, Python. Audio processing, Python. So think about this. Document is an object. I'm renaming files, I'm rewriting files, I'm creating images, I'm doing mathematical computations, I'm doing something that isn't text. We're going to expect that to be in Python. We're expect to see the gray box pop up. Trying to do something that's about understanding knowledge in text, writing an email, drafting something, simulating a conversation, reasoning about some information in text. We're going to want that to be in GPT-4. And we want to make sure that when we go and do something, certain tasks are going to require mixing both. And particularly when we deal with understanding large volumes of information, we're going to be forced to mix both approaches together. And we have to very carefully make sure that GPT-4 is doing the really heavy lifting when it comes to understanding the text as opposed to having Python do it. Now we'll talk about this later in the course, but I want to clue you in on what it means when that gray box shows up. It means it's writing some software behind the scenes. That stuff is good for certain types of tasks. Whenever you want it to analyze text, you want GPT-4 doing that. And so we'll see how important this is later in the course.